In 1510, Martin Luther climbed Rome's holy stairs seeking a sanctuary for his soul. He expected a holy city. Instead, he found an illusion. He watched in horror as priests at the altar openly mocked the sacraments. He was shocked at the greed of the church. He saw a clergy that traded their vows for the beds of prostitutes. He reached the top of the stairs and asked, "Who knows whether it is true?" Rome, the center of Christianity, was rotting. The Bible refuses to whitewash the image of Jewish and Christian believers. It seeks to lay bare the fallen nature of Christ's stewards with the same fervor that other faiths use to exalt the goodness of their founders. It describes Moses as a murderer, Abraham as an extreme coward, and King David as a predator who used his power to execute a man and steal his wife. But exposure of corrupt religious leaders and institutionalized sins did not end with the Bible. History continues this trend across time and religions. For example, the Protestant hero John Calvin facilitated an unjust execution. Jonathan Edwards bought and sold human beings as slaves. However heroic, Luther himself was deeply anti-Semitic. Today, most religions have a considerable faith in their community's morality. They usually believe their faith gives their community greater moral strength and clarity than that offered by the outside world. But only too often, the exact same religious community is told, "Be honest about your personal sins, but don't air our community's dirty laundry." In so doing, the community prizes a polished lie over a bleeding truth. Just ask any type of religious leader about child or spousal abuse within their community. Very often, the response will come right out of hell. They'll say, "That doesn't happen here." When someone experiences abuse and leaves that religious community, they usually aren't shy about their former community's moral brokenness. Throughout their lives, they'll tell hundreds of people about it. Because discussion about internal sin is taboo within that same community, an inversion occurs. The outside world comes to know the community's sin very well. Meanwhile, the community suppresses knowledge of its own rot. It does not know its own sins. Like Rome in 1510, every community has failed to meet its own ethical standards. Secular or not, no community is exempt from the reckoning that follows this failure. As such, each community is on a collision course with its own sin. This trend isn't a temporary lapse. It is a permanent, structural reality of human existence. History is a graveyard of religions that lied to themselves about themselves. In many cases, their self-deceit was a mortal sin. Denial was not a shield. It was a countdown to extinction. As these religions disintegrate, new ones pop up in their place. The cycle continues and repeats itself. In the Bible, churches are called to publicly expose the sins of their leaders. In 1 Timothy 5, we read, "But those elders who are sinning, you are to reprove before everyone, so that the others may take warning." In Ephesians 5, we read, "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them." When the illusion of a church's innate goodness is stripped away, churches shouldn't just embrace radical openness, as important as that is. While God does use radical openness to keep Christianity from going down the road of other religions, radical openness is only the beginning. If we expose our rot without a savior, we are left only with despair. The church's ultimate hope was never found in the morality of its leaders or the purity of its institutions. Rather, it is found in the one who stood among the ruins of religious hypocrisy and offered himself as the only sufficient sacrifice. Where every religious leader has failed, Christ stood perfect. Where communities hide their rot, he bore ours. He is the only foundation that does not give way when the stripping begins. As the Apostle Paul reminds us in 2 Corinthians 12, "My grace is sufficient for you, For my power is made perfect in your weakness. The church's glory isn't its own goodness. It is the mercy of the one who redeems what we cannot fix.